Welcome to another episode of Sim Sundays podcast. We are on episode number 42, and this episode is going to be a little different than pretty much all the other ones we've ever had because this one, it's 2v2. It's Tom and Chris from Gridfinder versus Tom and John from traxion.gg. This was a very, very fun conversation. Tom, do you read Traxion a lot? Because I actually find myself on that site way more than I'd like to admit. I'm on there all the time reading stuff.
I'm on it a lot. I find their writing to be kind of it's full of character. It's interesting. Like, it's a person talking, giving you their opinions. You're not reading like a generically formatted review article or some of them can feel a bit dull. But equally, they're quite concise. Like the key points that you want, if you want a 2-minute read, comes out quite quickly. I'm a big fan.
Me as well. And now that we've actually recorded the podcast and talked to them a little bit, the whole portion where you're saying it feels like another person, I understand why it feels like another person now after having this conversation, because they do pride themselves in the way that they write, and it's very important for them to seem more like a person, not just this, we are a big corporate news reporting site for sim racing. It's very, very nice. So hopefully all of you viewers and listeners enjoy it as much as we did, but here is the traxion.gg episode. Enjoy. Interestingly, my first experience with traxion.gg is kind of interesting because I was on vacation with my dad, and you guys released this wonderful article that said best sim racing podcasts, and Sim Sundays was on the list. And I was like, oh my God, we're featured on a website. So cool.
Oh, well, happy to do that. No problem. Well, thank you very much for servicing the sim racing community with this wonderful podcast. And for the invite today. We're both very happy to be here. But we both listen and with some other podcasts as well, I must say.
Oh, of course.
And hence why we did the article to help the community find some audio entertainment about their favorite subject.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that the one that you did feature on there, the Dave Cam episode, is by far and away our most popular one, because that's kind of I bet you most people come in through Traxion because best sim racing podcast, they type it into Google, you are number one, and then luckily our podcast is on there. So thank you for helping us get that exposure. It's pretty cool.
That's okay. I hope it helps out in some sort of small way. But,
Tom, you can chime in on this one. Our idea of a podcast was just one day we're sitting on a Discord call similar to the one we're using now, and just we go, we talk a lot about sim racing. This could be a podcast, right? Like, we could do that. That would be fun.
Yeah. Do you know what? In a way, it was kind of arrogant. We were there. We were chatting away about sim racing. We were like, you know what? The world needs to hear what we're talking about. Like, we need to get this out to everyone else. But our podcast has been a guest format. So every single episode we've had a new guest. Now, this particular episode, I'm kind of excited and terrified because we took a risk when we were like, well, we kind of both want to do it, but we want to have a guest. And now we've got this like 2 versus 1 dynamic when we have like usually a single guest. But now we've got 2 versus 2. So this is gonna be nuts. So I'm just gonna jump in here and say we have to structure this. Chris, we're gonna have to be disciplined. We're gonna have to be like professional broadcasters. So Tom, John, can I ask you both to introduce yourselves to our audience?
After you, John.
Oh, I was going to say we need a structure as well, Tom. If we're not, you need to take the lead here or something. But we
haven't thought this through.
Yeah, either way. So I am John Munro. So I am a video producer for the Traxion.gg YouTube channel primarily. So I'll play racing games and talk about them, do some live play style stuff where I'm trying out games for the first time and trying old games, and then also just write stories about them and try and give guides to people as well. So my job primarily revolves around the video side of things, but then I also will contribute some stuff to the wonderful website that Tom and the team have built on traxion.gg, and just try and bring some positivity to the racing game and sim racing community.
Yeah, nice, very nice.
That's beautiful.
The thing with John is he's extremely modest. So he does a lot more than that, and is an extremely hardworking team member. So pleasure to work alongside.
I'm crying.
I'm crying. Tears welling up in your eyes. Thank you so much.
Well, the whole thing is a team effort. I'm sure we'll touch upon that in a bit. But anyway, from my side, I'm Tom. I'm the editor of the website, and so that is my domain. So every single day, finding, writing, emailing a lot of people, interviewing lots of people, trying to get the scoops, and just creating articles and news for the sim racing and racing game community to see what's going on in the industry, what's coming up, what's happened.
Yeah.
Also game reviews, things like this. And that feeds in a bit into the video side as well.
You kind of feel like, I mean, I don't really want to mention one of your competitors, but it's a direct comparison.
By all means.
IGN for gaming, you guys are kind of like the IGN, but for motorsport-based gaming, which is very nice because, you know, when you get to those websites like IGN, for instance, you just get a feed of all kinds of craziness, and you're like, I don't know what to read. I don't really want to follow everything they do. But with Traxiongg, I like the fact that it's just motorsport stuff. So you're looking at sim racing games and pretty much just stuff surrounding racing. And I really like that format of your reviews where it's not like a 1 to 10 scale where you never touch any rating under 5. You got the nice, you know, you recommend. I just read it not even a while.
That's
10 minutes
Avoid,
ago.
Consider, wish list, or buy now.
Those are perfect recommendations because, you know, when you go to other review sites, you're like, I don't know what a 7 is. What is a 7?
Yeah.
I don't know. Should I get the game or is it bad? Like where are we at right here? But your nice, clear, concise words that we can be like, oh, they recommend it. Perfect. Easy. I can go buy it.
I mean, there's a challenge there because people are so used to the 10 or the 100 scale.
Mm-hmm.
But we thought as a collective to try and do something a little different because over the years, a 7 has been sort of seen as like a negative, like you shouldn't buy it. Actually, that would be like is that like a good score at degree level? Or it'd actually be like an A or something in a test, you know, and yet in the video game world, it's seen as a negative. So when we do like a wish list, we're not saying this is a bad game at all. We're actually saying it's really, really good, but you might just not want to spend $80 on day one. And there's nothing wrong with when a price of a game changes later on in the sale, it actually technically would change the review score, yet Metacritic is there forever.
Yeah, right.
So it's just trying to take that into consideration. And that falls into the full ethos of Traxion, would you agree, John? In that we're being critical, but we're trying to make the space grow and be open and welcoming.
Oh,
if that's fair.
100%. I think, you know, from our perspective on the video side as well, we're trying to bring like the games to the people and so they know exactly what to expect from it, but without kind of looking at all the extreme elements and trying to cause drama for the sake of causing drama. So, you know, we'll play a game. Tom's played a lot of games over the years. He's got a lot of experience, and he generally leads the reviews in terms of the actual reviewing and playing of the game, and just genuinely gives balanced feedback and thoughts about it. And the idea is that we don't really want to, you know, score something as this is definitely better than this or this is worse than this because of this. We just kind of want to bring an overall opinion. It should, you know, what are you going to get out of this game? What are the things that we think are good about it, and what are the things that we think in future could be done to make it better or could have been done differently? And just let people make their own decisions about it based on that. So we don't want to make direct comparisons. I think that's a good way of putting it in terms of, you know, this one scored 0.5 more than the other.
Right.
Yeah, and also that leads to, like you mentioned there, John. I've been inspired. Yeah, no, it leads to where if you did have a score, let's imagine if we reviewed iRacing against Assetto Corsa Competizione.
Ooh.
Okay, we'd get a load of traffic from that because the comments would be insane. But we can leave that to other forums that are already out there for the Flame Wars.
The Flame Wars, I love it.
Yeah, right. So if we give a similar game in the similar genre both a wish list score, you have to read the words as well for a deeper understanding as to what's the pros and cons and form your own judgment from that. So we're trying to re-emphasize the justification and also understand that it is just one person's opinion at the end of the day.
That's interesting you say that because if I'm honest, when I go to IGN to like look at a game that I'm interested in buying, I almost always scroll to the number first and then decide if I'm going to read it based on the number. So if it's like a 6, I'm like, probably not going to read that whole article. I'll just keep on moving. But interesting you say if you say wish list, you kind of have to read the words to understand why the recommendation is there. It's not just a pure, oh, that game's great, better go buy it.
That's the theory. And we understand that we might be losing a lot of traffic for that because people... It's different to understand, but that's what we're standing by for the time being anyway.
I also think there's a huge benefit for indie games here. So, you know, because a lot of indie games, when they've only got, maybe 4 or 5 staff, a couple of programmers, a couple of artists, and then the guy or girl that does the emails. Like, they're not going to be able to compete with like Kunos or Turn 10. So if you were to put it just as a straight score from 1 to 10, they're not gonna be able to compete. Whereas if it's just a bracket of like, you should try this game, this is a cool game, and it's like £15 on Steam, and it's a lot of fun. You can probably complete the whole thing in like a weekend, but you'll really enjoy it, and you'll probably go back to it over the years. Like, you kind of allow for that sort of expression.
That's a really good point, actually, I think, as well, because you're looking at a game like Forza Horizon or Gran Turismo, and they've got massive teams behind them, massive budget. You can still think, relatively the game's not as good as it should have been, or maybe it is as good as it should have been, but it's always going to be a high score because it's a big, huge project and it's a lot of money to buy. But you can't really give it anything other than a high score when you compare it to indie games with 4 or 5 people that have done something that's clearly not as big an experience, but actually within its own rights, it's a fantastically designed game, and within the confines of what they had, they've done an amazing job. So yeah, I think you're right. I think it's difficult because they're never going to be able to score necessarily as high as some of these major games, while at the same time you might think they've actually done a better job with what they've got of making something that people can get behind. And it also applies when you're comparing games across different genres, whether it's a really hardcore sim or something that's fun to pick up on a controller and play with chase cam, because these things have different goals in mind. So I definitely think it's more important to read the words and see what people actually think of the game and where they've gone well and why you might want to buy it, rather than just looking at what scores higher than something else.
I completely agree. And I think a lot of these indie games have a lot more character because you have such a small team, 5 to 7 people, 5 to 10 people, whatever it is. They inherently will have more ownership or sense of ownership over that game, and therefore inject more of their passion into it. I was lucky enough to, I just got back from the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco, and went out and met up with Carolina Mastretta, who is the founder of the studio that brought us Circuit Superstars. And we had a fantastic conversation for a few hours talking about Circuit Superstars and sim racing generally, and what's coming in the future. But we'll leave that for another podcast with her. And it was crazy.
I'm looking forward to listen to it.
Yeah, it's it was nuts. It was such a great conversation. But she told me that there's 5 full-time people in her studio. 5. Yeah. Like that is nuts. But when they were publishing Circuit Superstars, they brought on two additional temporary staff, and then went back down to 5 once it was out. But it's 3 brothers and sisters, right? And they love racing games, and the game that they brought out has so much it's
so much fun.
Character.
It's joyful. It's joyful.
Yeah. It's absolutely beautiful. So but if you put it up against Gran Turismo on some kind of like arbitrary. Anyway, we've covered that point. I think we're all here having this conversation right now because we're on the same page. But I'm going to bang my gavel again because I've got something, a question. I want to go through the journey that we often go through, which I always think is interesting, which is how did you guys get here? Because when I asked you to introduce yourselves, you both described possibly the best jobs ever. If you're a sim racer, a sim racing fan, you're like, oh yeah, so I spend all day like writing about games. Like, oh yeah, I basically play games and do videos on racing games, and just I'm just an expert in kind of how to judge. Like, how the hell did you get to this point? So let Tom and then John, like, what were you doing beforehand? How did you land this dream?
Well, John's story is a lot more interesting, but we'll hold on for that. We'll save the best. We'll save the best to that. No, I worked and studied in marketing and PR for a decade, and I worked at really good companies that I enjoyed working at, writing about automotive things. And in my spare time, I wrote about video games. So sometime during university, it's getting many, many years ago now, quite old, 15 years ago or something. There was a website called the sixaxis.com, which still exists. And it's primarily started as a general gaming website covering PlayStation news, but it covers everything these days. So it's like an IGN, but on a smaller scale, based in the UK. So it covers everything. And so I wrote on and off news stories, stayed up late doing E3 to cover what's going on in the world of general games. But my passion, since I was being very young, since watching Formula One with my dad, usual story, is motorsport and cars. I'm actually a car nerd first and foremost. Okay. And so then when I was working in marketing and PR, that's a lot of writing, a lot of content marketing, a lot of writing stories that are maybe ghost written for industry publications, let's say, or localized into German about 3D printing on a Toyota Le Mans car, stuff like this. So it's not stuff that's immediately engrossing. You would never necessarily find it, but it helped me develop this ability and passion for writing. And then with the Six Axis, I just did purely their racing game reviews for a number of years. And then I saw this opportunity come up on Motorsport Jobs, which is a website for motorsport recruitment.
Yep.
Applied, went through the interview process, and that was what became Traxion. So writing before it launched, I was there writing a load of articles with a colleague so we could have something before the website would launch.
Right.
But the key thing to mention before, that's a lot of hot air, John, apologies. We move on, is that it is a dream job. This is absolutely my dream job. To play games all day is what people think. But the number one passion has to be, in my role, to enjoy the writing and the words.
Sure.
And the words at the end of the day are what will come through and, create not a legacy, but create our reputation. So it's a love of words first, and then it's a love of cars, automotive, and video games.
Not to kind of derail this before we get to John, because John, and we do want to hear your story, but just because you've just made such a point of saying it's all about the words, is there any fear right now about ChatGPT coming in and being able to say, right, ChatGPT, write me an article about Circuit Superstars and why people should support it because it's an indie game, and mention the flair of the produce, blah, 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 and then just hit go and it's just done, and you do 10 of those a day.
My career is over. It's forget it.
I wasn't expecting that. I think no, absolutely not.
I think it will be like one of these things where it will work in parallel and actually make mine and other journalists' jobs easier. So, we have to write guides or news stories to get enough traffic to pay the bills, and ChatGPT might be able to assist with some of the more mundane ones that help on Google search engines. But in order to interview someone and get their opinion or get a news story before anyone else, it can't do that. And also, it has to have some basis of information. Someone has to write something first before it can know about certain superstars. Yeah. So if we're in the game of getting things under embargo, and making those contacts before something's announced, then it has to borrow from me. So
we're feeding ChatGPT. It's not feeding us.
Well said, actually, because that's something that a lot of these people who are talking about the AI generation of articles and just content in general, that they're not really thinking about. So like art is also getting a lot of problems with AI generated art, but AI generated art or AI generated words have to come from somewhere, and that somewhere is going to originate with the original creators still.
Yeah.
Well stated.
So I'm looking forward to it, and I think if it makes my life easier, then fantastic.
Yeah, right.
That feels like a really healthy approach to this, as opposed to like, oh my god, oh my god,
oh my god. Tom is my AI chat function. If I need something, I'm like, Tom, write me something about this. Tell me about this, and he just goes and does it, and the video's produced.
Tom GPT. Yeah. So, John, why don't you tell us about your story and how you got all the way up to Traxion GG?
There's quite a lot of parallels, because I've not actually heard Tom's origin story in the same way, so it's quite interesting. But there are a few parallels, especially later on. But I'd say, like, if Tom's passion is cars initially, mine is motorsport. So I've always been huge on motorsport in all forms. So when I was younger, I used to go home from school and I'd be the one that would sit on, I think it was Google Video at the time, and watch like 1989 Paul Ricard Grand Prix and part 1 out of 4 and all the 10-minute segments. I've always been motorsport crazy. My dad competed and still does compete in the Scottish Hill Climb and Sprint Championship in a single seater. So that was kind of my entry to motorsport, not circuit racing as you all know it, but it was my entry to paddocks and loud noises and race cars and everything like that. So, and I used to want to be a commentator actually. So I used to love listening to old Murray Walker stuff, and I'd sit in my bedroom at 6 and pretend to be Murray Walker. Really embarrassing, but that was kind of my thing at first.
We've all done it.
Hopefully, or we'll pretend to have done it to make me feel better. That's fine as well. So that inevitably led to, well, in the north of Scotland, because I'm from the Highlands, there aren't many racetracks. Knockhill's the closest racetrack. It's 4.5 hours south of where I'm from. So
sorry, Knockhill is 4.5 hours south.
Correct.
Of where you are.
Yeah. So I'm
you live in the sea.
Very close to it. Yeah, I'm about an hour and a half from the very top to like John O'Groat and Thurso and stuff like that.
I forget how big it is.
Yeah, it's very long. There's just not as much stuff. It's very down. What's the word I'm looking for? It's very weighted at the bottom. Put it that way. But yeah, so because my dad had been around that environment, I think that's probably where a lot of the passion came from. But I was probably more into watching motorsport than he was, because I had more spare time in my hands when I was 6 or 7 years old. Naturally, that led to computer games, playing Toka Touring Cars 2 on the PC, and then Gran Turismo 4 on the PlayStation, and I was just mad about racing games because that was my way in. But then when I was 16, I was able to be old enough to get a race license, so I started competing as well in the Scottish Sprint and Hill Climb Championship when I was 16, and had a lot of success. Managed to win the championship in the first year, the top 10 championship, and become the youngest person to do it, and the youngest person to win an event on debut, and all these kind of things. So it was all very positive. And then I was like, maybe I could be a racing driver. How does this work? So
you win something, and you're like, well, let's see
if I can make a career out of this. And so we basically put a lot of effort into trying to do that. So I went down south and started circuit racing. Very long drives, driving to Silverstone and Brands Hatch for each round, from 4.5 hours north of Knockhill. But we made it work alongside school. So I was competing in Mazda MX-5 single make racing, and I managed to win Max 5 Championship in 2016. But sadly, as the usual racing story goes, you don't need to say it, but budget problems and basically you realise that a career is not a viable option unless you're a factory works driver in endurance that started off with a big pot of money, or you're just that talented. And I'm good, but I'm not that good where I can make it work. So quite quickly realised that's not a viable career option, but I'll try and keep it going as a hobby, and I want to work in that kind of industry. So I did media at university in Glasgow, got a job working at a simulator centre in Glasgow, doing VR sim racing for everyone and having a bit of fun there. And then I actually knew a few folk at Traxion before Traxion even existed. I did exactly the same as Tom. I was on motorsport jobs, and I saw this project coming up, and I knew someone who was involved, and I spoke to them and just said, listen, I don't have many skills yet. I've never had a full-time job. I'm just out of uni, but I'd like to work in the media. I love motorsport. Is there any room for me? Can I make everyone's tea and coffee and get involved, get my foot in the door with this? Because I have a lot of passion, even if I don't have yet the experience and skills. And they said yes. So I, like Tom, I found myself finding out about Traxion a good few months before it launched, and then basically learning on the job how to make videos and everything. So I think amazing. As it goes, for a first full-time job, I'm incredibly lucky, and a lot of the skills I've learned from doing Traxion, I've been able to build and grow with the brand, which has been amazing. So as Traxion has continued to grow, I've also improved my video making and writing and presenting.
Of course.
And that's pretty much it. It's just been a strange mixture of real racing and online gaming and sim racing, which has led to here.
I wouldn't call that a strange mixture. I'd call that an amazing mixture, because I'm kind of the same way, where you said you're a fan of motorsport, not necessarily a car guy. I'm kind of the same. So when I'm racing in games, I'm not like picking iRacing because I want to race this one single car. I pick up all of them, which is very expensive in the end because of iRacing. But it's like, I just want to experience all the cars and all the tracks and all the games and everything. Doesn't matter if it's Simcade or simulation, because you have that debate going on.
Don't do it.
I love sim racing and motorsport, and the overall idea in motorsport that you don't have to get first. You just have to be better than your last race to be continually improving. And I love that. It's almost like this fight with myself to win versus myself, and maybe a couple of others in there if I find a rival at some point.
Well, that's the amazing thing about sprinting and hill climbing, because you're not ever racing against people on circuit. It's a bit like, think of it like a tarmac rallying in single seaters, and there's lots of different classes, so you're never necessarily in the fastest car in the field. Some people in your class might have a more expensive car, or a lower power, or more power. You're always fighting against your own personal best, because it's essentially a qualifying run each time. And you're doing the same tracks. Unlike rallying, where you're doing 20 different stages, you're maybe doing 4 attempts at this one stage to get the best possible time. So you do a lot of competing against yourself and improving, and then obviously that leads on to circuit racing. But it's interesting. As I've gotten older, I have to say, even though motorsport and the competition has been something I've loved, I've become more and more emotionally attached to cars as a thing. So I've never been very mechanically minded. Like I am rubbish at helping out. I would never be able to take an engine to bits or put it together. And someone asked me for a tool, I'm like,
YouTube
can
now,
can you show me? Well, I'm using YouTube all the time to help me. So I've never been that side of motorsport interested. I've never been engineering focused. I've always been media focused. So I like talking about it and analyzing it and stuff like that. But over the years, I have to say my passion for cars has definitely grown. So I now fall into the category of I hear a sound and I'm, is that this particular car from 1991? And I love a car because of the emotions that it evokes and stuff. So I'm definitely going more that route now, I have to say, as I get older. But I don't actually know how any of it works. I don't know how the car was put together in the first place.
Yeah, similar experience over here. I pay other people to fix my car because I'm like, I got nothing on that. So interestingly, both of you went to motorsport jobs and got your position with Traxion. So something that's really cool about sim racing is, yes, it's been around for years, like a really long time, since I was early teens, right? But it's really just starting to kind of gain a foothold and really starting to grow at what I would consider to be an exponential rate. So a really cool opportunity is happening within a budding industry like this. Is you don't have to have the perfect degree, the perfect resume, the perfect, work history in order to get into motorsports in general, in the sim racing levels. That's pretty exciting if you really think about it, for those people who are like, oh, I've always wanted to be a commentator. We'll just take that from you, John, because I had the similar thing. And Mr. Tom over here introduced me to a bunch of people at Sim Racing Expo 2022. I casually mentioned that I wanted to be a commentator, and now I do sim racing commentary like once a week. So, John, if you want to do some sim racing commentary, I'll pull you in with me.
Well, just to comment on that, actually, I kind of didn't really mention this amongst the story because it's a long story, but I did start doing proper sim racing probably about 2013. So racing in like the Touring Pro Series and stuff. And I was still wanted to be a commentator. And within, I think, probably 8 months of me doing it, and I was only like 14 or 15 years old at the time, I got the opportunity to do commentary on the broadcast as well, because it was less serious at the time, less developed. There was more room for people to come in and give it a try. And if you weren't very good, it didn't really matter. It was all a bit of fun anyway. So now I'm really embarrassed to go back and listen to me midway through my voice breaking doing commentary. But it's changed so much now. You've got lots of people who are well practiced, professional at the commentary that go about it through sim racing and can translate that to the real world as well. I mean, I've now done real world commentary and sim racing commentary, all because I got an opportunity when I was 14 or 15 just because I fancied it, and now it's become such a big thing.
I also find
I'm always inspired by the George Morgan story, where he started because he was rubbish at racing. And I'm saying rubbish. Thanks, Tom. He's rubbish at racing. So he decided that with his group of friends, he's going to commentate on top of the races instead. And as you may know, George Morgan's actually commentated on F1 in his career. So it's like, how can that happen? How can you actually get to? He went to Monaco in like the helicopter and everything. Like, how does that happen from sim racing? Right? That's absolutely incredible. Tom, sorry I interrupted you for that little offshoot.
I was just going to say, I really I found it very refreshing, John, when you said that your the first games that you played were TOCA 2 and Gran Turismo 4. I find that there is like a subculture within sim racing who almost like compete to be like, I've been doing it since Grand Prix Legends, or I was doing it since Ayrton Senna's Super Monaco Grand Prix. It's like, and there's I actually had this racing game on my Abacus before computers were even invented, and it just like continually goes back, and it's like this competition, like who played the first game on their like Commodore 64 or whatever. Like, so,
and it can't be on a normal console.
Right. Absolutely not.
You've got no sim racing credits if it's not a Grand Prix Legends.
Yeah, you have to have been driving with A and D, or I'm not interested. So on that same vein, Tom, tell us about your sim racing journey. When did that start? What were your first games? And if it was Ayrton Senna Super Monaco Grand Prix, then so be
now
it.
You mention it. No, I'm going to be one of those nerds though. No, it was really properly. It was TOCA 2 as well, at the same time as Colin McRae Rally, which was in a bundle deal with an original PlayStation for my 10th birthday. So that's what really got me into it. Fantastic. But before then, I did have, my parents had a PC with the Network Q RAC Rally, which for those who don't know it used to be a round of the World Rally Championship in the UK, and it had its own dedicated game on PC. There was two of them. I had the second one, so I think it was 1996. And again, I didn't use even a keyboard. It was a joystick, which is not correct, but that's the equipment we had. that got me into it a little bit, but the first one really was TOCA and Colin McRae. There was also had a Nigel Mansell game on the Game Boy, I think, but it wasn't very good. So,
well, any sim racing game on a Game Boy feels
Yes.
like it would be kind of suspect. Like, I don't know about that one.
yeah. So to put it out there and get some of the hardcore sim racing nerd credits, so to speak, yes, I played this Network QRC rally game. But then with the PlayStation, would have a paper round and Saturday jobs and evening jobs. And instead of saving up for something serious, I would go to my local, what's called Computer Exchange here in the UK, buy lots of used PlayStation games. And it all came about through actually the console side before PC. And I think actually that's many, many people's in the wider racing game space, sim racing space, is journey. And I think sometimes, I don't want to speak out of turn, there is an elitism that, if you weren't on PC, it's not good enough. But we at Traxion disagree with that wholly. We're completely open to everything, and we don't forget when we were 10 years old and didn't have the money to buy our own equipment.
Right.
You get what you're given from Santa. And it's fantastic. It's fantastic. So, yeah, it all came about through that original PlayStation. Couldn't get enough of the touring cars or the rally games.
Very, very nice. I remember the old PlayStation, like it wasn't even the DualShock. I guess it was just the PlayStation controller.
Yeah, before they put analog sticks on it.
Yeah, before analog sticks, and you're playing Gran Turismo, and you're just like tapping the directions as fast as you can, so that you kind of turn instead of having analog. Those were the days.
Even old Gran Turismo 4 is actually easier to control with arrows than analog. I still do that.
Really?
I find it is
wow.
definitely something I'm more used to from growing up as well.
I guess there would be like assists.
Yeah.
That help you through the corners, because it's like, well, you don't really have the input method to be able to really steer. So it's going to be doing a little bit of extra for you. And just, it's an interesting thing, because most of the time, or a lot of the time, some sim racers will forget the fact that it's supposed to be fun and not supposed to be like the hardest thing you've ever
100%.
done, or like it doesn't have to be as real as possible. And funny comment about that is, a lot of sim racers have never been in a race car. So they're like, that game's less real than this game. And you're like, well, you've never actually been in like an F1 car. Like, come on, how do you know?
Well, I don't want to speak for you, John, but you have been in several racing cars, so he's got a good idea. But
he's actually, he's a good meter for realism, because he's actually done it.
But as a general rule, we believe that the serious stuff, we do cover that with integrity and looking for realism, and if it's in line with your real world expectations. But we also believe that the more casual games can coexist, and we can still enjoy those. Like there's nothing wrong with playing Assetto Corsa mods all weekend, or being in an iRacing series, or competing in the Bathurst 12-hour, and then I don't know, sometimes you're just a bit tired and you just want to play Formula Retro Racing World Tour with a controller on an Xbox. Right. So we're completely open to that, and I think that's one of the key things. You rather it was rather kind of you to say IGN is a rival, because I would love to reach their traffic numbers.
Oh.
But obviously there are sim racing outlets in our immediacy, and we like to think our differentiator is first of all focusing on the words as the number one thing, but second of all, we do cover the odd game that's on Switch and on mobile, because there is a younger audience, and we want to try and make sim racing grow. And to do that, we have to try and make it a bit more accepting and welcoming. So that's the idea.
Oh, you don't get sim racing games in cereal boxes anymore. I don't know if any of you guys remember Frosty's Grand Prix back in the day, but this was a hardcore sim that you get in a cereal box.
But tell me about the tire model.
Exactly. I totally agree with Tom. Like I did a lot of sim racing, and especially picked up again big time during lockdown, which is kind of what led to the whole thing with Traxion. But for me, I'm a sim racer. I come from a real racing background, but when I get home from work, most of the time, if I want to play a racing game, it's going to be Circuit Superstars or Rally or Forza Horizon, with and it just doesn't matter. I'd rather sit on the sofa, comfy with a controller, and I can have a really, really good time and enjoy the physics for what it is, rather than needing to spend half an hour setting up the sim and making sure the force feedback's all correct. And like there's definitely space for both. And I think a lot of people forget that sometimes and judge one or the other, and it has to be better than this or worse than this. But actually, you can love both. It's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with it. If you're having fun and you're able to race with your friends or just enjoy a single player experience, why the heck not?
Do you think?
Yeah, Forza Horizon is one of my guilty. I can't even say guilty pleasure anymore, but it's just one of those games where like I have some of the best memorable moments in sim racing from that game, because they put you up against like a hovercraft and you have to race through the mountains for no reason. You're like, this is so unrealistic, but it's just fun because you're crossing over, jumping over the thing, and just having an all-out good time rather than like iRacing where I'm like, oh, I can't catch this guy in front of me, or oh, my lap time is bad because I'm messing up turn 2 or whatever it may be. Just relaxing and playing sim racing is something that's just kind of missed a lot of the time in the conversation surrounding sim racing.
Yeah, it definitely is, and Forza Horizon is a great example because it really is a video game. It's almost like an RPG in some ways, but then it just happens to have lots of cars. But you're unlocking accolades, you're unlocking achievements. You want to find those hidden things. You're going to find this other hidden thing. You're going to do a tune. You're going to share it online with someone else. You're going to look at liveries. That's sort of the appeal to it. It has this really engaging reward loop, which is engrossing, and we, I don't want to reveal so many industry secrets, not that we have any, but we cover Forza Horizon a lot. No, we cover Forza Horizon a lot because we love it, and we have team members who are deeply passionate about it, first and foremost. But then we also know that because it was on Game Pass with a $1 trial, it's a massive, massive audience. And so...
And for a website trying to gain some audience, that makes a lot of sense, of course.
But then if someone comes to us and hears about us and visits our website because they want to try and find this hidden treasure hunt chest in a Forza Horizon 5 festival playlist, but then the related article or clicking around is something about how to gain licenses in iRacing, and they're like, oh, what's this? Or there's a video where it's John talking about the new Assetto Corsa Competizione track guide. Then that's our role in life, basically.
What you're saying is that you're essentially the gateway drug for sim racing.
We're trying.
Oh man, yeah.
Yes,
that should be a slogan on the website. I like
that. Gateway drug
to sim
racing. You heard it here first. So, do you think you guys are able to kind of be a bit more balanced, reasoned, like kind of come at sim racing from fairer perspectives because you've seen behind the curtain? So you get to speak to a lot of people who work on these games, people who, especially the indie games that I've developed a new love for in the last couple of weeks. But being able to go out and speak to the people who are behind the art, behind the physics, the studio founders, and do you think that has changed how you think about games? So that process that you've been through since joining Traxion, do you think that changes how you think about games compared to before you were at Traxion?
Definitely. I think I always had an appreciation for game development, but now I know a lot more how hard it can be. There's so much money, and there are teams behind certain bigger games that far exceed the numbers you expect, and a lot more planning goes into it. And when things get delayed, like let's say the Rensport beta, I saw there was a lot of kickback to that, but ultimately there'd be even greater kickback if it came out and it wasn't up to standards.
Yes,
which we've seen with some other games as well. So I think what we try and do as well, like you touched upon there, is actually speak and interview the developers and go to these events. So John was recently, I'm sure I'll touch upon in a minute, the ESL round in Poland. He was there. He was speaking to Morris, who's the CEO. And I was at recently, it might be seen as a slightly different game to a traditional sim racing title because it's got 2 wheels, not 4. But the next Isle of Man TT game is a simulator. And I did my LAN and back in a day to get the interviews, to play the game, to get the footage, to get the thing, to do the social media posts, and seeing them in person and asking them why you developed this and why did you do that. For example, they were like, well, we haven't got VR because we've got an all new physics engine for this one. So we've only got so much people and budget. So we have to prioritize things. Whereas, before that, as a fan, you'd go, well, this doesn't have VR. I am not buying it. And fair play. That's your opinion. But there's also an element of trying to understand what goes into it. And I'm sure John will attest to that when you're in Poland, right? With everything trying to go on there.
100%. Being there in person and seeing the people involved, getting to know them, even just their characteristics behind the scene. Because you know a name and you think, owner of a business or trying to make money, whatever it might be. When you actually meet the people and speak to them, it's amazing how much passion and how everyone is just desperate to create the best thing possible within their own, capabilities. Whether that's budget or the size of the team or resources, whatever it might be. People are desperately trying to make things as good as possible. And when you hear the reasoning behind certain decisions and you just get to know people a little bit, there's definitely a newfound appreciation for what they're actually putting out there. You want them to succeed. You want it to be as special as they hope. And you also hear the reasons why certain things aren't the way that some people might think they should be. Looking at an example, I went, the Art of Rally, which is a game I talk about a lot because I love it. I'm passionate about rally, and it just looks beautiful. When I first heard of that game, it was before I was working with Traxion, and I saw, I think Jimmy Broadbent did a video on it, and I thought, that looks all right. I wouldn't play it, but that looks fine. Since joining Traxion and since I've actually managed to speak to June a couple of times, which is the developer, the man behind Fun Selector, and Tom's interviewed him. It's Thomas, this is on the Traxion podcast in the past as well, and getting to know his story and what he's like as a person, and the effort and time he puts into this game and the love he puts into it, makes me love that game so much more and appreciate so much more than I did beforehand. This is an indie game with one guy who's got a very small team and just puts his heart and soul into it as much as possible, and then his character comes out for me in the game. And for us, we're so fortunate to have that insight and be able to actually understand these things and speak to these people, ask them questions that a lot of people will never see or never hear. For them, it's just another game title in their Steam library or in the shop that they're never going to pick up. But you feel invested in their story. You want them to do well. Exactly the same with Circuit Superstars. That game especially has been continually developed and gotten better and better since its launch. And I just feel so warm when I think about it, because it's like these lovely people have put in a huge amount of effort to make this game as good as possible, and you definitely, it changes your opinion for sure.
Counter that with we will always say if something is not good, but we will always do it in a way that is justified and is constructive feedback. I don't think we'd ever publish anything that says, "Oh well, this is bad." It's we didn't like this because this and this and this, and the competitors do that and that. So we do have to. We are. The whole idea is trying to improve that games with constructive criticism, as opposed to without justification. And the second thing is, no, that was the only thing I had.
Have you had any particular challenges with that? Have you had any particular?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's been like a title where you're like, how are we going to write about this, but still show respect to the effort that's been put in, even if you're completely just not interested in the game? It's failed here, and here, and you can't understand any of the decisions they've made.
Oh yeah, there was one great example. I should be clear, obviously, and people know this already, and we are open about it. We are part of a company called Motorsport Games, which is publicly listed on the NASDAQ, which the majority shareholder is Motorsport Network, so who own Autosport.com and Motorsport.com, and that's why we do writing for there as well as Traxion. And obviously, one division is to run esports, another is to make video games, and obviously the NASCAR 21 Ignition game wasn't what we all expected and hoped it to be. And the company's very open and public about that. So for us, not a challenge at all to be, we wrote a 2,000-word polemic, my colleague Justin did, who's American, and I'm a NASCAR fan, so he should know, about why this is not so good, or why this one element has potential and why that's not so great. And we publish it out there. Of course, people might think, well, you have to say something positive about it, but that's simply not true. So the only challenge there is actually our people's perception of us. We actually have a great group of people. It's a big team effort where we will all talk about it, we will all play it, we'll come from different perspectives. So even if one person's struggling, someone else will have a different viewpoint. And we will always publish our honest opinions out there. I think the integrity of our writing is absolutely the number one key thing. I've said it 6 times already. I don't want to bang on that drum too hard. So to answer your question, really, there's never really been a time where we've struggled with what to say individually, because John will help out, or Ross, or Crystal, or Justin, and we'll get it sorted.
It reminds me of a conversation I had with Florian Hasper of VCO. So he was organising obviously VCO, and he also runs BS Plus Competition. And so he would often have the public say to him, well, how can you maintain integrity with VCO if you've got a team that's competing in your competition? Surely they're going to know the tracks, the cars, the conditions well ahead of everybody else. Like how can we possibly trust that this is fair? And in the same way as you're a publisher that is very publicly linked to a game, you must have to really, really scrutinize yourself every time you write about anything, IndyCar being delayed again, how much do we want to splash about that? Is it something that we can just ignore, or are people going to notice that, Race Department and RacingGames.gg and Overtake all did a story about how it's been delayed, and look, Traxiongg hasn't? How do you manage that?
Well, I just want to say about that, we did it 3 or 4 days before everyone else.
Sorry, I should say that was like a hypothetical scenario.
That would never happen, because here's the thing: we listen to everything about the company is public, because it's on the stock exchange.
It has to be,
and it has to be, And we stay up late at night and listen to the earnings calls, which are very dry. And
I can imagine.
our role is to report on everything from every game in the same way, pragmatically and with facts. So even if it comes to recent maelstroms about alleged cheating or not cheating or hacks on sim racing, you may have not seen, we haven't really touched upon it because we can't prove it and we are not in contact with the source direct.
Yeah.
And so that is our philosophy on everything. So if EA or Codemasters comes out with a statement or allows us the opportunity to interview someone to get comment, absolutely. But if it's just a knee-jerk response, that's fine for social media. Happy days, have at it. But it's our job to be pragmatic about everything. So when it came to that IndyCar delayed, but everyone wants an IndyCar game. No one wants it to be delayed. No one wants another NASCAR 21 Ignition, though, let's be real. So we covered not just, the game's delayed, but direct quotes from the CEO, from the earnings call that we stayed up late to listen for. So and we do that for EA. We listen to every EA earnings call. Embracer Group, which owns Milestone and has just signed today, as we speak, a partnership with Straight 4 Studios for the GTR Revival game. So
I saw
and Digital Brothers. There we go. You see, well, we got a press release, so we're just quick to report on it. But yeah, so a lot of these companies are publicly owned, and we just cover it direct. But that's what the CEO, that's what this person says. There we go. And if they say it, we publish it. Simple as that.
So you're very much in the commercial world, and it's not necessarily something you write about a lot. Is the commercials? It's more about the games and whether they're fun, and the people that the consumers want to read. But just by nature of talking to the studio owners, the CEOs, the founders, all these people all the time, and you're getting press releases before anyone else, and you're going on these earnings calls and bits and pieces. You're very much in that commercial world. What has surprised you the most about the gaming industry and sim racing specifically? What have you learned that you think has surprised you the most since you've kind of pulled back the curtain with Traxion?
Ooh.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's not surprising in a way. I suppose it is. They're just the vast sums of money that it takes to develop a game. Digital Brothers, who owns 505 Games, who publishes Assetto Corsa and owns Kunos Simulazioni, their reports are, and I can't remember the exact specifics, so I'm not going to be quoted on that, but I did write them in the article on the traxion.gg website, plug. And it was something, it was in the our profits are down tens of millions this quarter. And you look at why, and it's because they're developing a new Assetto Corsa game. So it's not so much that the games that they're selling at the minute aren't selling well, or they're losing money hand over fist because everything's gone to pot. It's actually every penny that they've got is funding whatever's coming out next year.
Yeah, and it's the normal flow of a studio that is developing franchises like that. You have to go into a red mode on your budget sheet for a while in order to get that new game out. Otherwise, you're just kind of sitting stagnant. And, we have Assetto Corsa for the next 50 years at that point.
Exactly. And then the other thing is the cost of track licensing and car licensing and that whole...
Yeah, I can imagine.
Legal mess there. When you hear people speaking about that, I get the impression that the pandemic was amazing for sim racing. Obviously, it's a terrible thing for the humanity. One thing was there were all eyes on sim racing and racing esports, but it also meant real-world track owners were like, this is popular. Every new game is going to be 3 times more expensive to license a track. And I don't think necessarily the consumer can appreciate that, when they say, why isn't this game got this track? Why isn't that game got this track? Why isn't this platform? They have to develop it, which takes time, but there might be a scenario where there's a clashing licensing conflict, or you just don't have the funds available to license Fuji or whatever it might be.
Right. That makes sense.
Are you saying then that games could and should be doing better at communicating to fans?
Maybe
what kind of plugging that gap between what the fan has expected because they've watched certain YouTube videos, read articles, etc., and then the release date, because it's like we were saying earlier with Rennsport being delayed, right? There's that sliding scale between NASCAR Ignition coming out very soon, and then like your Skull and Bones 12 years in the making of whatever. Like there's a sliding scale of when you release, and obviously you want it to be perfect. Like, do you think that the game studios need to do more?
It's not just the game studios, is it? It's the publishers, the investors, the marketers. They're all in this together, and it's a video game industry-wide thing of judging when's the right time to announce something. and when is not the right time to announce something. So we just played. It's not a sim game in any way, but I just did a preview for Lego 2K Drive, and that was completely secret, apart from a couple of leaks which we did not cover on the week before, until this, March. So last month, and it comes out in May, but it's taken 5 years to get to that point. So that's quite a good way of doing it.
Yeah.
But then the risk from 2K side is, well, this has cost X million over 10 years, and we've got a team of 300 people paid. We need to hype this for 2 years beforehand to guarantee we're going to get the sales and the pre-orders.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's a balance that I don't know the answer to. Yeah.
I really struggle with, E3 was canceled this year, so we won't see anything for that. But video game conferences in general, one of the biggest things that bugs me is like they'll hype up this game that you've maybe seen or maybe haven't seen, and they're like, "Oh, release date to be determined or to be announced," and you're like, "Why did you even show that?"
So that means it's at least 3 years away or 4 years away, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's far enough in the future to where you'll forget about it before it releases and then remember, oh yeah, I remember seeing that like 5 years ago or whatever, right? It's one of those things where I want to see the games that are coming out in the far future just because I'm a gamer and I love all of that hype and the excitement. But I'm also on the other side where I go, I don't want to see that at all until like it's a couple months out and I can be like, oh, let's pre-order right now. It's going to be here. We're ready to play. Let's go.
It's
very hard.
It's so tricky, isn't it? Such a tricky balance.
Yeah.
Like the marketing side of things, they're going to want their game to be, as you say, build as much hype and be people to be excited as possible about what's to come. And you want to, if you've got some cool new features, you want people to know about it to make them excited. But then at the same time, you're balancing that with over promising and under delivering. Maybe you hit a fork in the road, or you hit a bump in the road, I should say, where you suddenly realize that there's a problem with this, or this is going to need to take some time, and then you're already on the back foot because you've already said this is going to happen. And you'll notice a lot of the time at the moment games are being delayed, and sometimes it'll be snuck out there that they were coming in this year, and then maybe it's next year, not make a big splash of it. And it's such a tricky one because if you're a game developer and you're doing something really cool and something really new and unique, you're going to want people to know about it and know that you're on it and you're on the case. You'd be sitting on this really exciting thing that you just want to be able to share with people, and you can't. I can imagine, like from their perspective, it must be so tough sometimes having to hold back the knowledge. Like for the Lego 2K example, imagine knowing you've been working on this really cool looking Lego racing game and not being able to say anything. And what if someone turns around tomorrow and says they're doing the same thing with another brand, and then suddenly it looks like you're following in their footsteps.
Nightmare.
So yeah, it must be very, very tough. I don't envy them.
I promise. We've been working on it for a long time. I promise.
What I find even more fascinating, and it is the Rensport situation, and we won't go into this too much because we've actually got Morris on the show next week, so I want to ask a lot of these questions next week. But like they've got this weird situation where the game has been delayed, but they're still managing to put out the esports series, which obviously there's fewer requirements when you have small local LAN events as opposed to huge servers with potentially like hopefully tens, hundreds of thousands of people waiting to get into lobbies and bits and pieces. But I wonder, has there ever been an example of this before? A game that hasn't like purposely launched as esports only. So this wasn't meant to be an esports only title, unless it was. Has it positioned itself as the esports title by being esports only for a significant period in the minds of racing game fans? Because if that was the plan, it would feel like that's a really smart plan, but they know that they would get backlash from the gamers unless it was an accident.
I think, right, well, there's quite a lot to unpack with Rensport and ESL. Yeah. And I've listened to your recent podcast, and I think you mentioned it all, a lot. And I think that typifies what the sim racing community is feeling about this at the minute. That this is the biggest story. It is huge, but there are also a load of other really interesting sim titles on the way as well. Let's not forget that. But before I dive into that, I think, well, John, you were there at the recent one. I was at the summit in May last year when they announced the game and stuff like this. You were there at in Poland. What are your impressions?
I mean, Rensport for me is a fascinating case study because it's gone about things in a totally different way to any games we've
really
seen
has,
before.
yeah.
And I love the transparency. I have to say, they're making a big effort to communicate things, and yes, things might be delayed at times, or they're not able to please everyone from the community and able to give them a go, but they are trying their best to communicate that as much as possible, and they are getting the help of the esports drivers to come in and obviously help with physics and feedback and everything like that. But I can understand it's going to upset a lot of people. It's easy for me to sit there as someone who's got access to the beta and has spoken to the CEO and has been at the first event to say, oh, this is really cool, but I'm not sat at my living room going, this is ridiculous, why can't I play this game and give it a try when it's clearly there to be
Right.
tried? So it's I see it 100% from both perspectives, and I think they're trying something very, very unique. They're testing it. They're basically airing out their dirty laundry in public. If things go wrong, people are going to see it and people are going to be able to give feedback. But
That's
because no
true.
one's
Yeah.
invested in it yet, no one's put the money into the game, they can find these problems, improve it, and then hopefully when it's ready to launch, there's no excuses. If something's not right with it, it's like, well, you didn't tell us that. They'll have a well-tested game that people have seen develop from the start, and I have to say, from trying it, it does feel in a good place already in terms of the physics and everything. I enjoyed my time with it.
Right.
It doesn't feel like something in as early a stage of development as it seems to be, but I think they're just trying something very different, and there are always going to be negatives that come with that. But the general feeling for me is quite positive. If they can turn around a game that's well polished and it's had all this work done at the early stage in public, and people have seen the improvements they've made, they've seen that they've been listened to, I can't see it being a bad thing. But the problem is how patient are the sim racing community, because they will want to try it. They'll see all their favorite drivers doing the esports competition, and they really want to give it a go. And I think that's what Rensport want in a way. They want people to be watching this thinking, I want to do this myself.
You asked if there was another game that does that, and through this conversation, I remember the most recent Call of Duty did this. Now, it was a much shorter time frame because it was 2 months prior, so they were running content creator esports competitions for like a month before the game came out to build up more hype for the game, and then obviously it dropped a lot sooner than like Rensport is at this point. But I wonder if more games are going to kind of go into that route where they're like, okay, let's test it with the influencers and the people that can bring visibility to our game, and then release it to the public. It's an interesting way to go about it because it did make me want, in the Call of Duty case, it did make me want the game even more than I already did. So Rensport could be taking that same path where they're like, okay, we need the hype train to last as long as possible, and teasing the beta and then delaying the beta is only going to do so much. Let's keep it in esports so that people are watching it, people are enjoying it, and then they're just continually riding that train up until we're finally ready. That's kind of interesting if you think about it. Tom, you opened up a can of words in my mind.
I've got another theory as well, but I'm going to let Tom go first.
All right. Well, to your point, Tom, where you were saying how, has it positioned itself as like the esports platform? I think there's quite a few mechanics to this process. So Rensport is a sim racing platform that's due at some point soon. But I think ESL R1, which is the GT3 based esports competition that we're all referencing and watching, that's funded by, as far as I can tell, ESL. And ESL is an existing esports company that wanted a sim racing platform. So how that partnership came about, I'm not too sure. But it's, yes, okay, Rensport, they're thinking maybe, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, okay, we're going to get some marketing benefit and exposure benefit from this. It's a big risk if there's any errors with it, though. However, there's also this element that people seem to be overlooking, that ESL also wanted to do this, right? And ESL's kind of running the esports competition. So there is one of the slightly negative things, I think, at the minute is the perception of Rensport of being another ACC. Oh, it's GT3 cars. But when you speak to them and when you've listened to their interviews, and hopefully people can read some of the articles we put on our website, from the offset, they've said it's not just GT3 cars. They announced the electric Goodwood Hill Climb, electric Mission R. I'm sure there'll be more announcements soon, but let's be honest, this is quite a while away, this game. So they're focused on those first because there was an agreement with ESL to run an esports competition.
Of course.
So they're kind of a little hamstrung from that point of view at the minute, but I'm sure we'll see throughout this year things that will alleviate that. And what I'm really looking forward to is something that is varied and realistic, but the physics so far are quite approachable as well. So John did a good interview with Morris actually at Poland, and we have an article about it where he's talking about the potential for console versions as well. I think that's much needed for sim racing to grow. So I really hope this time next year there's a fully featured game with single player careers or whatever it might be. We'll have to see. But I think it's fantastic to get the name out there with the esports ESL. It's good competition. It's good for esports to have another competitor. But
it is.
I think it's been typecast at the minute, and that's not fair.
Well, I should say that to kind of get my caveat out here is that I love Rensport, the concept of Rensport, what I've seen about Rensport, and how Rensport has just exploded onto this sim racing scene.
Yeah.
I think it has elevated sim racing in a way that no other title has managed to. The fact that it is sharing the stage at ESL, in the same arenas as your kind of, this is always a strange phrase to say, but traditional esports, like the fact, we're now sharing, like the sim racing has now been elevated to a new level, and now we get to kind of show off, this is what sim racing is about, to other fans who would go and watch other esports. So I love it. I'm an absolute fanboy of the whole concept. I think it's great. And I really like how different it is. And I'm just trying to understand how it's all come about. And again, this is my last thing on Rensport, because we're not going to talk about Rensport the whole time, because we're doing that all next week. But
you can if you want.
Do they or do they not have the most qualified, intensive, comprehensive, and broad set of testing teams putting this game through its paces right now in a way that no other game would be? As in, like, you've got esports teams with like engineers going into this game to look for every little exploit they possibly can. Like, anything that could be found will be found by the fact that you have pro esports teams diving into it to see what they can do with it. Like, they are going to learn a huge amount about this game by doing this process. Oh, and by the way, you also get like a load of viewers of the R1 tournament as well. That's pretty handy. Like, I think it's genius. I think it's absolutely genius.
I think it's difficult.
They are learning a lot.
Oh, on you go, Tom. On you go.
No. Well, I was just going to say, before you jump in, John, I think they are learning a lot. I think it's really good to get the development, but it's worth noting that it's fixed setup and there's no changeable weather conditions. So they're going to learn a lot.
Damage model either.
And there's no damage model. So it's step by step. And so once those are implemented, I think that's when the real learning starts, if that makes sense.
Right.
But they're in the room with the right people.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Who are hands-on is what I mean. The teams are there. That they're not twiddling their thumbs between the races. That the team is going to be there talking to, as in the Rensport team are going to be there talking to all of the drivers, all of the teams
1000%.
around the drivers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the drivers themselves, they're not necessarily invested in Rensport. They're invested in their competition and winning these esports competitions. And they also drive in many different series. They're invested in doing well for their team as well. And they're so for the driver's perspective, their frustrations come out when things aren't going their way. And I was there in Poland.
Right.
If a driver was frustrated with a particular way the car behaved over a curb, or the BOP or whatever it might be, they make their feelings very clear, because it's such a high intensity competition, which is going to be really good, because you are going to get genuine feedback from these drivers, and because they don't have any stake in the game other than themselves and the teams they race for, you probably get a more balanced and fair and real reaction to it. And I think one thing that's difficult for Rensport to balance is they're walking a tightrope between making something that's really entertaining for people who want to watch esports and making things that works for ESL, a good show, versus creating a product that people that want a realistic sim racing title are going to want to jump on and drive and feel like they're doing something realistic. So yes, one decision for physics, or maybe the way the cars come into contact with each other, not bouncing off or not crashing in a certain way, might be better for the show, but might actually not be what people in the community think they want in a realistic sim. So they've got a really, really difficult tightrope to walk, I think. And I can understand where Tom's coming from. I think they've done a great job with it so far. But it's going to definitely be telling when it actually comes to the people what they think, because I think a few people have been quite frustrated with the lack of chance to actually try it as well, and they've got to kind of balance that as well and give good reasons for why not. So it's just a fascinating case study, as I said at the start. It's so interesting, and I'm really curious to see how it develops.
And it's
we'll hopefully be there at the next one, so looking forward to that.
Well, that'll be a lot of fun, and it's interesting, because you're right. There's been a few podcasts now where Rensport has come up, because it is a talking point for sim racers, and which is great, because it's exciting.
Absolutely.
And it's new, and we make no apologies for it. It's fun. I'm a big fan, because I think a lot of stuff that Rensport is doing is making us question and analyze other bits of the sim racing world. Which, as a huge sim racing nerd, I absolutely love. But Rensport is a lovely segue onto Crashy Laps, So I've been looking for you.
Someone's been reading the website today.
Yeah, so we've got Crashy Laps, Tray Racers. You do a lot of fun games, right? But I'd like to kind of like use these as an example to dive into your process at Traxiongg, because a lot of people listening will consume a lot of content, but I'd like to kind of just quickly kind of go through the mechanics of what this looks like. So let's take Crashy Laps, right? From the email landing in your inbox, or the phone call, or the meeting somebody at an expo, like talk us through the stages of like, you realized that this game existed, you then decided that you wanted to cover it. Does the team get together and decide who's going to do what? What's your approach to testing? And then you like, I want to know the full, like, how does the content right. So when we're on the toilet scrolling through and we read your Crashy Laps in about 2 minutes, and then we're on to the next thing, right? I want to know the story behind it, right? Tell us how it happens.
It's not particularly exciting. Sorry. No, there's several different methods. One is, hopefully people have heard of us and they send you an email, PR company or game dev. The Crashy Laps, for example, that's by one person, I believe. This is an upcoming indie game that we're talking about. And we spotted that on Twitter. And then from there, we do research. We might contact them. We might ask if there's a press release. In this case, there wasn't. There's a Steam landing page. There's images we can use.
That's one guy. He's like press release. Yeah.
So you direct message.
he's got direct message
on. Right. So you message people. There are many other examples on social media and LinkedIn or whatever it might be. So I did an article about a small indie game. Yeah, what was it? Tray Racers. Also this morning, that was a PR representative sent me a Twitter message. But oftentimes it's an email in our inbox. But there's also a huge element of us outreaching as well. So if a game gets announced and it's not via a press release, but it's it's on their social media feeds. Let's say it's the new MotoGP game, for example, which is a big game for us to cover this year. Then I would immediately find out which PR company is working on that particular title, or is it the publisher direct, or is it a freelancer that's working on it? So you have to do a lot of Googling, a lot of LinkedIn searching, things like this. Send an email, introduce yourself, explain what Traxion is, what it's about, how many visitors it's got, how many followers it's got, what we can do, can we have an interview, can we do this, can we do that? So there's a lot of emails sent and messages sent to try and get these opportunities. So I think that at no point ever are we complacent. As a team, we are constantly looking for new games that we might see pop up on the Steam website or on social media, but it's also a lot of email work, which is really dry. But there's a lot. There's just as much.
A little bit about that kind of stuff.
That's all I do.
There's just as much work goes into the outreach than there is writing the article and getting that scoop, or getting on that list to that preview event, because there's only 10 people there, and you've got to make sure that Traxion's on it. So there's a huge amount of work goes into that. Then when we have these opportunities, then John will feed in, is this video worthy or not? We can't put everything on the YouTube channel. The algorithm works in weird and wonderful ways. So our aim for the website is to make sure we cover as much as we possibly can. Hardware, software, sims, updates, DLC. But ultimately, we will prioritize as a team. On the writing side, there's Crystal, like I say, there's Justin, there's Ross and myself, plus some freelancers. And we've got a little Teams chat. Right, is this newsworthy or not? Is this a story or not?
Okay.
And then from the video team, and John will attest to this, I'm sure, then it's a decision that John has to make along with the Osley and the other video members to, are we going to make a video? Is this good angle? Is that fair, John?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from our perspective, we start the week with a few different things. So we may have a hardware, new steering wheel or something that we're being sent to us and we're reviewing. So we're kind of combining original ideas. So essentially, in a way, it's similar to Tom. We're writing features, we're writing scripts that we want to turn into videos, whether it's our own passion projects or whether it's something that we think would be an interesting topic to research and write about. So we do our own scripts for some videos, and we also have separately from that the editorial team that Tom manages, who will provide us with stuff. So they'll go, okay, this is happening next week, this new game's coming out, or we're going to write an article about everything that we know already about the new Forza game. Do you think this is video worthy? And we'll have a quick chat between us, and we'll make a decision as to whether or not, is this something we want to cover on the YouTube channel? Do we have the resource for it? Because we're often tied up with getting the videos we're currently doing out of the way, or reviewing hardware, which can take a long time to go through the whole process. And we make that decision based on the resources we've got available, and go from there. So you will see a mixture of editorial based stuff like game reviews that Tom's written. He's captured the game as he's played it. He's written everything about it. We'll then take the script, do a voiceover, and then get some additional capture if we need to, and obviously edit the video. In the background, we're working on our own original projects as well. So, for example, if I have a particular passion about an old game, I might write a retrospective about it and what I like about it. Or if there's a new update for an existing sim, if it's interesting enough and I think enough people will want to know about it, I'll maybe go and give it a try and give my opinions. So we definitely have a balance of things to be doing from a video side as well.
Our ultimate aim is to try and cover everything, but we literally can't do that.
Of course. So when it comes to trying to cover everything, and then also passion projects versus the big giant projects, or what's it like working with an individual developer for something like Crashy Labs versus someone like Microsoft when you have to get in touch with them for creating content?
Well, this is just, I'm generalizing here. This is not always the case. But firstly, you generally won't deal with Microsoft. You deal with their appointed PR agency. And they can change on a yearly, monthly basis. So unfortunately, you can build a relationship up and then that person moves on. But then they might work on another game.
Reply of, I no longer work with these people. Or
right.
Whatever.
So you almost have to start again and pitch the whole thing again. But that's if you don't do that, you're not going to get the game for review or get the interview. And then also there's the element of, but that person might move on. They might move on to a different project. So, the Lego 2K Drive thing came about because someone who worked on, and we'll go back to it again, the Square Enix side of Circuit Superstars moved to 2K, knew that we did some good work, kept in touch. Okay, we got one of the few publications that weren't massive IGN size to do the Lego game. So it's things like this. And also, just generally when you might speak to an indie dev, you speak to that person direct. Most of the time, but not all the time. Also, like with a smaller indie game, they might, like a team of 5 people might make it, but to get it on other platforms, they might employ a porting agency whose job is to make the Switch version or make the PC version if it was first on PlayStation or vice versa. So then you have to work out who that is, get in contact with them and all that. But there's no real difference in terms of always professional, always got the stats ready, always timely.
Which one do you prefer to work with? Do you prefer big studios or small indie devs?
This is really boring to say. I don't mind either. Like it's
really,
ultimately we care about the game and all the sim.
Oh yeah.
So as long as we get responses via email and it's all cordial, then happy days. I mean, just quickly as well, slightly on a tangent, but in terms of like deciding what we cover, I think one thing we do a lot of is esports race reports, as if they're real world racing, because we're trying to legitimize the space. I mean, it already is legitimate, but try and make it more professional than ever. And we know on the analytics, they are not the most read things that we do. Like if we wanted to make a load of money, we'd just do how to engage reverse in Forza Horizon 5, right? So
you'd be surprised.
You'd be. So like all of us on the team, plus James Kirk, who is a freelancer, we have to watch the full race. You have to write the report, get the results, capture the images.
Yeah,
a lot of time and effort for a medium amount of reads, but we feel it's important to grow the space, make it more serious, more professional. And I think the drivers and the sponsors and the teams like to see their names being mentioned when they win a race.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's the same reaction that I had when I saw Sim Sundays in the article on Traxiongg. I was all excited, shared a screenshot with my family and stuff. I'm like, oh, look, it's my podcast. It's exciting to see your name in lights, if you will. It's just one of those things that's really cool.
But it's also
so
good
a lot of these grassroots communities getting that exposure. It's pretty cool.
But not even the grassroots communities. The bigger esports series, the fact that the series organizers can turn around to sponsors and say, this is the reach we can give you, because last time we got X number of people on Traxiongg and this outlet and that outlet and this outlet, it gets covered here and here. These were the YouTube, like, you kind of add to sim racing's appeal to sponsors, which means there's now more budget and more appetite to put on more bigger, larger events. You're doing God's work, basically.
Well placed.
Yeah, I think we would like to do more of this, let's say, smaller and community-based series. We just need to reach a tipping point where we have got the time and resource available to do it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so I might be saying this and someone might be listening going, well, you didn't cover X, Y, Z.
You didn't cover ours. Yeah,
right. But we do cover more than most. So
it's a frustrating limitation sometimes, isn't it? When you have, we've got all coming around in 1 week. We have 2 new games, and this randomly we find out news that the F1 game is announced when it's launching, or this indie developer gets in touch, or we have a steering wheel that we've promised to review this month, also needing filmed and written and edited. So resource management is a huge part of our job as well, of just prioritizing things, but not just prioritizing the same things every time. We've got to keep a balance. So sometimes you might need to make something that gets less views, that is engaging for the people watching, or informative, or a guide, versus something that might get lots of clicks but not actually help us build something meaningful. And it's a constant balance that we're trying to just cover all of these things in a safe way. But that's probably one of the big challenges, is resource management.
And just to reiterate, it is a huge team effort. Me and John are here talking, and we're saying a lot of, we did that, but it's we're just conductors. And
they're working away right now. We're just talking to you guys.
As much as we really enjoy this is an hour and a half not writing articles. So that we have to consider that.
Well, it's an honor that you're here.
Sorry,
definitely. Thank you. Jeez, we gotta go. No,
sorry.
So, as sim racers, do you find? I think your answer is going to be a little different, John, than Thomas's necessarily. But do you find that you sim race less for pleasure than you did before you got into the sim racing industry? I know Tom and I both. We went through a time where we're building Grid Finder, but we're barely sim racing anymore, just because we're always focused on building this new product instead of racing. I've made a massive effort to schedule my racing during the week now, so I always race at the same times during the week. But how often do you guys get to sim race for fun, not for necessarily an article for Traxion?
You go first, Tom.
Yeah, it's definitely less. The last couple of years we've worked on Traxion, but on the flip side to that, you do get to play sims during the day. So that's
you're like, I have to. Yeah, I have to run some laps. Dang it.
Yeah. But you do come at it from a different angle. So mentally, it's different. And on a weekend, then just yesterday, I was trying to get some licenses on iRacing and failing miserably. And you do think of it as a different way. Oh well, yeah, but what if is that part of the UI correct? And what was going on with that crash physics? In some ways, you might argue it ruins it, but it doesn't. I think all of us on our team, we're still at Traxion because we still love sim racing at the end of the day. So.
Very nice.
For sure. For me, there's been a big shift, and I found it fascinating, actually, because when I first started with Traxion, I've been doing, especially through lockdown, from all the things that happened with COVID-19, I've been doing a lot more sim racing, and I've been competing at a high level in Assetto Corsa Competizione, doing SRO Championship, and all sorts of, with the Sim Grid World Cup and all of these things for a professional sim racing outfit. And then what I found was when I first started working with Traxion, ACC was therefore the game I knew the most about, because I'd raced in a competitive level. So I could write all these guides for how to go around each track, and how to nail your pit stops, or how to perfect wet weather driving, all these kind of things. And the interesting thing is, you'd think I'd play more racing games now that I'm working with Traxion, but I actually feel in a lot of ways that I know less about certain games, because we're trying to cover so many different things. So my job is not just to be an expert at ACC anymore. My job is to show off the new content that's coming out on ACC, and then maybe talking about a different game, or reviewing this steering wheel. And I actually find that in a weird way, and it's going to sound bad, but I almost know less about certain games now than I did before, because I'm covering
No, that makes
a wider
sense.
range of things. And when I go and play ACC at work, for example, I'm not playing it to be able to learn about it and get the most out of it. I'm actually playing it to produce the content. So it might be that I'm trying to film a video about, say, the pit stop example. I'll go on there and I'll spend 2 hours just doing lots of pit stops to capture for the video, and I'm ticking off. I'm almost doing a tick box exercise. So, oh, we need a good shot of an overtake into turn 2 at Paul Ricard, or I need to show that a wet line, loses you time on turn 3, and I'm not playing the game for my own enjoyment. I'm playing to provide a good capture that looks nice in a video. And then when I get home from work, and we've got all this amazing equipment here, that we've obviously reviewing the hardware. I get home from work and I've got my PC in the spare room up on the desk with a G29 strapped to it, and I just don't necessarily want to do more of that. And I think, you know what, I'm gonna go sit in the living room, sit in the sofa, and I'm gonna play something with my partner on the Switch, or maybe I'll play Forza Horizon on a controller and just unwind, because it can be very intense, a lot of playing racing games, and it's hard to find the time to pursue a hobby like professional esports, because if I've been working all day on the sim, capturing for Assetto Corsa Competizione, the last thing I want to do is go home, fire up a set of Corsa Competizione and do 100 laps of the same track over and over again to do an esports event, because it's not that simple. So I still love my sim racing and I do it for fun, but I don't have the capacity in the same way that I did before, that I don't miss it as much because I do it all the time anyway, and in a different way. So it's definitely changed for me.
Yeah, I don't think that anyone would argue the fact that turning your hobby into your job eventually makes it so that your hobby's not as appealing to you anymore. I definitely can see that happening in many different aspects of life.
I wouldn't change it for the world, though. It's definitely
no way.
Yeah, is it work to live and live to work and blah 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 blah. This is definitely the right way around. And every single day, I realize that I'm very lucky to get up and just do exactly what I want with a group of people that are all doing what they want because they can, because we've got this opportunity to build something in an area that it's sim racing, it's gaming. Like it's a bit cliche, isn't it, that like your teachers when you're a kid say you can't spend your whole life playing games. So it's like, well, okay, well, now they are technically they're still like they are like that's not all we do, but you can immerse yourself in it all day every day, and that is a route now, which is absolutely great. But guys, thank you so much for your time.
That's all right.
Very conscious now. You've said that you've got an hour and a half where you haven't been writing articles, so the pressure has been on for the last 10 minutes to make some high quality content.
I want to keep talking. There's another hour we can cover on this, so we're gonna have to do part 2.
I was about to say, I feel like with the 4 of us, like you just put like a problem statement in sim racing in the middle, and then we could record a podcast for 2 hours. Like, iRacing versus ACC, go right. Okay, we could do that for another hour if if we wanted to. So it's been great having you on, and it's been really tricky to try and cover as much stuff as possible, because I think we're the sort of people that can dive very, very deep into every single one of the elements that we've spoken about today. But I think we've done a pretty good job at kind of covering a broad variety of subjects. But John, maybe part 2 is the way forward. We'll do another part.
Will you guys be at Sim Racing Expo 2023? Maybe we can do a live podcast where we're all in the same room together.
We would love to do that, and we are planning TBC. But we were there last year,
nice.
And I don't see why we wouldn't do it. We've just not booked anything yet.
Insomnia on Friday?
Yeah, we will have to keep in touch.
Sorry?
Are you going to Insomnia on Friday?
No. Should I have been?
I went last time, and there was some sim racing going on. There was some sim racing games. A track racer was there, so I'm going down with one of the Grid Finder team, and we're going to meet Johan, who is the crazy Dutch dude that runs
the
European side of track racer. He's a lot of fun.
Fantastic.
Yeah. But guys, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Well, no, listen, a pleasure. Thank you very much. We wish Grid Finder all the best with your future plans. And just generally for the sim racing community, there's a lot of exciting stuff coming straight for Studios. What the heck is Kunos doing next?
Obviously, we haven't covered any of this.
What?
There's so many.
I wanted to go to GTR Revival.
GTR Revival. What's EA doing with the WRC license? All this stuff. So hopefully people can read about it on Traxion.
And Enduroca, we could talk about Enduroca as well, Tom, because I know I've done a race with Tobias before in that. So we absolutely did a part 2, but it's been a lot of fun, and thank you for having us. And I personally I love what Gridfinder do, because as someone who's been league sim racing since I was 12 years old, trying to finding a community that works for you and you get on with people and is a good competition level has actually changed my life. Like, since I met a lot of people I did 10 years ago, we're in the same, or even 12 years ago, we're now, a lot of us are working in sim racing, and we see each other at all these events. I'll bump into them in Poland, and we're all working for different people, all because of a community that I picked up from a sim racing league, from a shared passion. So what you guys are doing is facilitating that for a lot of people. So I just want to say thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, no, thank you. And guys, as soon as we hit stop record, let me show you something very cool that that we're building. Anyway,
you'll get the exclusive off the recording.
Yeah, no traction.
I'm typing away.
Be careful, Tom. They're a media outlet. Well, thank you guys. That'll do it for this episode, but we'll be talking to you soon for part 2.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Welcome back, guys. I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as we did. Tom, that was an amazing interview. What do you think?
I feel like if we were in a pub, we'd be there for hours and hours and hours, putting
shutting it down. They're like, get out of here.
The sim racing world to rights. Yeah, it was great. It was great chatting to them. Obviously there's 4 of us, so we all had a lot that we wanted to chip in with. In fact, we have done one other episode with 4 of us, and that was the Circuit Superstars.
That was
the 2 brothers, which is interesting because we spoke about Circuit Superstars quite a lot. I did enjoy their love for the indie games. We also spoke about Rensport a lot. It's interesting hearing their theories. It was just really nice chatting to 2 people that just love it as much as we do, and just have this broad perspective of the sim racing world. Because often we'll talk to SimiCube, and it was about their kind of segment of the market, which is the higher end market. Right. So it's AC, it's iRacing, and it's all things hardware. Or we spoke to Aris when it was all about Assetto Corsa, or we've had like Chris Hay, where it's like it's content, and Dave Cam, where it's about content creation. Whereas I feel like when you speak to Traxion GG, because they're kind of commentators on the whole of sim racing, we got to approach it from a very broad perspective, and we could touch a little bit of everything. And I think John was right. We need a part 2. We need to make a list. Yeah. We need to agree a list of things, because I want to speak about GTR Revival, because that game looks awesome. And we didn't even touch it. And in EA and Assetto Corsa 2, and it was great.
It might end up being a 3-part series. Who knows?
Maybe we'll just make it a regular thing. We'll do like a quarterly show.
So many, quarterly show with Traxion, just panel. To go over. Yeah, right. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed that as much as we did. Thank you for watching and listening. As always, if you're looking for a sim racing league to race on any night of the week, or specifically on AC, ACC, any of the games that are out there, go to gridfinder.com. Find that perfect lead on that perfect night for yourself. Or if you're a league owner, go ahead and list your league on there and, fill your grids so that you're not, empty or missing some people on that grid start. Other than that, we'd like to thank our episode sponsor, Track Racer. Thank you, as always, for being with us for the whole entire beginning of this podcast. We are at 42 episodes in now, which kind of feels amazing. We're almost at that 50 number, which maybe we should do something extra special for 50, Tom. We definitely need to do something there. But listen on all your favorite podcast services, and we always appreciate you being here. But that'll do it for this episode. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.